Still on business, the director of the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, Mr. Moda Yusuf, has expressed concerns over Nigeria's resurgence of inflationary pressures after months of relative respite. This follows the latest Consumer Price Index report from the National Bureau of Statistics, which shows that the inflation figure increased by 0.55% from 32.15% in August 2024 to 32.7% in September 2024. Mr. Yusuf attributed the increase in inflation to factors such as the rising cost of petrol, depreciation of the naira, and surging transportation and logistics costs. He noted that the dynamics driving inflation are yet to be effectively subdued. These factors include the depreciating exchange rate, surging fuel price, rising transportation costs, logistics and supply chain challenges, high energy costs, climate change, including resultant incidents of flooding, insecurity in farming communities, and structural bottlenecks to production. Mr. Yusuf urged the government to provide concessionary import duties for industrialists and prioritize the resolution of critical issues like power supply, logistics, and foreign exchange. The second day of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group 30th Anniversary Summit ended with key stakeholders in Nigeria's economy advocating the drafting and implementation of policies to stabilize the nation's economy. Interactive sessions, high-level panels, and CEO meetings took center stage, addressing the country's pressing economic challenges. Uloma Oyemachi reports.
On day 2 of the summit, NESG spotlighted over 7 key topics, ranging from fiscal policy to the African Continental Free Trade Area, the future of oil and gas, and strategies to accelerate industrialization. At the breakout session on oil and gas, participants discussed the evolving role of NNPC Limited as a private company and its responsibility to secure Nigeria's oil resources.
Has questions. Remember I said at the beginning that
the panelists identified challenges impeding growth and emphasized solutions, including the need for greater youth involvement and the adoption of artificial intelligence.
The pace at which things are changing around us, and particularly technology, is so fast that what got us here is not going to get us into the future.
The youth, as a nation, they're 70% of our population, right? So we will have to make the investments to train them, to encourage them.
I make bold to say that since the enactment of the PIA and some of the supporting things we have talked about earlier, we're actually in a much better place. However, the building blocks are there.
Attendees also expressed optimism about Nigeria's future, while urging citizens to take responsibility and avoid exploiting challenges for personal gain.
For lack of a better word, what I say is we are our own problems, because the woman who is in the market selling tomatoes that was transported on a truck, which was fueled by diesel, then tells you her price has increased because fuel price has gone up. Tell me the correlation between that. So I think it's more education that needs to take place. People need to understand that fuel prices are really intra-city.
The summit attracted CEOs from across industries, with NESG emphasizing that these conversations will drive sustainable economic transformation across Nigeria.
Nigeria's future can only be sustainable through actionable reforms, as highlighted in the day 2 of NESG summits. Key players in the oil and gas sector, as well as fiscal policy and even agriculture, have called for even more collaborative efforts to ensure that all that is intended in years to come are achieved. Uloma Oyemachi, TVC News, Abuja.
We'll now be joining Helen Osamide Akins in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, where she'll give us update of the 30th edition of the Nigerian Economic Summit. Helen, over to you. What's day 3 looking like?
Yes, boss said today marks the end of the 30th edition of the Nigerian Economic Summit, which started since on Monday. Today's session, just like the previous 2 days when the summit started on Monday, had different breakout sessions and panel discussions. This morning, different sessions have participants where they discuss on issues like the first session this morning. They have participants deliberating on how Nigerian can elevate the role of data and information in the national food security and conversation. Also look at tackling hunger in the country. And then the ongoing session right now talks about the race to 2023, catalyzing subnational action towards meeting the SDG goal. And immediately after the session, the closing ceremony will take place. And at the closing ceremony, participants are expected to every discussion that had been discussed since the beginning of the summit will be put together. The recommendations made will be put together in the 30th Green Book. And this Green Book comprises of all the recommendations made at the summit and will be submitted to the government, hoping for the government to implement these recommendations. And then from here, they'll be looking forward for another edition, which will be the 31st edition in 2025. And I believe when the session starts, it will have the participants coming together to look at all the recommendations made in the 30th edition, how far it has been implemented, and where corrections need to be made, where more emphasis needs to be made to the government on the need of recommendation will also be stated.
Very much for that update. We'll be back with Tolu Lokwe on Business Nigeria for some more updates from there. Thank you again, Helen. Well, let's now look at global markets. Asian equities fell today after a disappointing outlook from Europe's biggest tech firm, ASML, dragged down chip stocks, while expectations that the Federal Reserve will take a modest rate cut path bolstered the dollar. Stocks in Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea, all home to major chip firms, fell 1.7%, 1.2%, and 0.6% respectively. The MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan lost 0.31%. European stock markets were set for a weaker open, with Eurostoxx 50 futures 0.62% lower, German DAX futures dropping 0.2%, and FTSE futures down 0.12%. China stocks were volatile as investors awaited details on stimulus plans. The blue chip CSI 300 index was down 0.24%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng index was 0.88% higher. And looking at Turkey's economy, Turkish Exporters Assembly TIM says Turkey's export hit $22 billion in September, registering a 1.8% decline year-on-year and a slight decrease from the previous month. In September, the European Union remained Turkey's leading export market, with its total imports from the country valued at $9.1 billion. According to data released by the TIM, the automotive industry recorded the highest export value of $3.4 billion in the month, marking a 20.9% increase year-on-year. Overall, Turkey's export over the first 9 months of 2024 increased by 3.2% year-on-year, reaching $192.8 billion. Chairman of Turkish Exporters Assembly, Mustafa Gatepe, while commenting on the latest figures, said Turkey has generally maintained a trend despite some fluctuations since the beginning of the year. Away from that, Stellantis says it is recalling more than 20,000 hybrid crossover SUVs in the U.S. due to a concern with the brake pedal on impacted models. The automaker notes that some SUVs may have been built with a brake pedal that could inadvertently disengage while being applied. It said it is aware of 15 cases globally, including one accident with no injuries reported. The company also flagged affected units in other countries, including 2,280 in Canada, 134 in Mexico, and more than 30,000 in markets outside North America. Now, talking oil price, crude oil prices decline as investors contend with uncertainty around tensions in the Middle East. U.S. West Texas Intermediate fell to sell at $70.40 per barrel, with a downward price review of 0.26%. Brent crude futures also experienced a downward price margin of 0.27% to sell at $74.05 per barrel. Bonylite sold at $78.62 per barrel with a price decline of 2.84%. And for the OPEC basket, crude oil dealers offered $77.18 per barrel with a downward price review of 1.59%.